All right. Well, a brief hiccup in the internet connection, and we're live. I'm News Director Doug Jenkins. This is Findlay Mayor Lydia Mihalik, and she has agreed to be our guinea pig for what might be the first of many interviews we do like this, where we just spot up the iPad and talk to people about what's going on in the community and do them live here on Facebook. Thank you. I like to think it's a great idea. So you have been to some interesting conferences lately, and obviously as mayor, you go to several of these conferences, or a few conferences a year where you get ideas, but the ones that you've been to this year have had kind of a different focus. Starting off, let's start at the beginning of the year in January, where you were at the Mayor's Conference in Washington, D.C.
Right, our winter meeting, our U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting we do every year.
Let's talk about some of the overall bullet points of that before we get into one of the sessions in particular that I found interesting.
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, every year we get together in the winter meeting, and then we also have an annual meeting. And the winter meeting really is kind of just to touch base and talk about some of the issues that are super important to our communities. It ranges from the impact of automation on our economies to healthcare and health issues, the opioid crisis. I was a part of a presentation that talked about that, and it was a great session. It was a great couple of days in Washington, D.C. It was about as cold as it is here today, which is always nice. But I enjoy getting together with my colleagues. I think it is a nice opportunity for us to just kind of sit around and talk about what's important to us. And it's also nice to be able to kind of learn from other communities. You know, I get lots of questions about our economic success and how we're doing so well relative to economic development. So I ask other communities how they're dealing with some of the challenges that we're facing right now relative to housing and relative to homelessness and our drug problem that we have, an opioid crisis and those types of things. So it's a great opportunity for us to just expand what we normally do at the conference during the winter meeting.
So it's kicking around ideas and just seeing what might work in other communities and how maybe they can apply here. I'm imagining there's probably not a consensus ideal on what you do about housing or what you do about those types of issues.
No.
But did you hear any ideas that you thought, well, maybe we can talk about that and brainstorm a little bit about that here locally?
Yeah, one of the things that I actually learned that I thought was really neat, and I'm going to try and replicate here, is access for children on free and reduced lunch to recreational opportunities. And that's something that we're kind of kicking around here in Findlay to see how we would accommodate that. But the idea actually came from Denver, Colorado, and they issue a My Denver card to the students through the school system, and then it gives them access to free recreational opportunities. So whether that's the pool or, let's say, the Cube for us here in Findlay. But there's also a food tie-in as well. So when they get access to those particular activities, they're also offered the opportunity to eat. Which childhood hunger is something that every community deals with across this country, and so that's just another way to touch base with a vulnerable population. And I think that's something that we could definitely do here, and we should look to do here. And so we're trying to figure out the logistics at this point. But I moderated a session on childhood hunger because I'm being the chair of the healthcare committee at the conference, and there were some cool things that came out of that.
Obviously, that's been a big public-private partnership here in the community with United Way as
Absolutely.
Well. Let's talk a little bit about another session, and let me open up the chat window here, because we will
in case.
Take some questions. Wait, that's not at all what I wanted to do. We're going to go ahead and let that go there. If you do have any questions or comments, go ahead and hopefully they'll pop up on the screen, and if they don't, well, we'll try next time, or perhaps we'll address them in another interview.
Just have to get a better guest.
Well, you're the guinea pig, so if it doesn't work, it's your fault.
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll put it that way.
Get broad shoulders.
So one of the sessions that you took part in, and it's not something I had really thought about, but I think it's an interesting topic, is millennial mayors.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see younger and younger mayors across the United States.
It's a cool thing.
Some things like that develop. And I never really thought about it in sort of a generational shift in terms of government leadership. What were some of the things discussed in that session?
I was fortunate to be on the campus of Georgetown with Mayor Pete Buttigieg from South Bend, Indiana, and Mayor Francis Suarez from Miami. And first of all, I didn't even realize that I was considered a millennial. So I'm really excited about the fact that even though I was born in late 1979, I qualify as a millennial according to Georgetown. So I was happy about that. But it was a really interesting conversation around how we approach things. Our view on what the future looks like is a little different. our view just on politics in general. I think there's a lot less partisanship in a younger generation, in this new younger generation of mayors, an ability to work across the aisle. It doesn't really matter what the letter is behind your name as much anymore. And while it's great to say that we're strong Republicans or strong Democrats, we can take ideas from one another regardless of where they come from. And it was a neat opportunity to engage with students from Georgetown University and with a couple of up-and-coming shining stars across the country.
What are some challenges that were discussed that maybe a younger group of government leaders face that they maybe didn't anticipate or hadn't been faced by older leadership?
I think one of the topics that came up is, being able to embrace the tradition of maybe an older city, like South Bend is an older city, the city of Findlay is an older city. I mean, we're just over 200 years old. And being able to embrace the traditions of the past, because obviously there are a lot of those traditions and a lot of that history that has had a massive impact on our trajectory as a community. And you want to embrace that, but also be willing to get a little out of your comfort zone about what the future could potentially look like. And so you want to try and be innovative and moving forward, and progressive isn't necessarily a bad word here. When you're talking about building a city and building the future of a community, but we also talked about just inclusion and how important it is to recognize that everyone has a say and everyone has an opinion, and it's more about us and how we can do things together as opposed to I and you independently. And we talked a lot about that, and it was a comfortable conversation, and I was happy to be a part of it.
How do you then take what you learned in that conference and come back to Findlay, where obviously you're probably younger than most of the voting base in Findlay, Ohio, and then make it, like you said, all right, you say the word progressive, and for a lot of people that's a trigger word.
Right.
So how do you then frame it as, like, here's something we could look at, and then how do you include everybody in that conversation who may have different viewpoints on it?
It's a tricky balance, I think, and what I've learned over the last several years, now this is my 7th year as mayor, is that it's all about harmony more than anything, because no one particular issue gets an equal amount of time. Some days, we're all excited about flood mitigation, and other days, we're talking about, how much money we're going to spend on infrastructure. Or our lack of available housing, or perceived lack of available housing in the community, and what are we going to do about homelessness, and how do we address childhood hunger, and what about transportation issues, and all of those things that we really haven't as a community been super laser focused on. And I think what's important is that we have that conversation to recognize that as neat as 5G infrastructure will be in the Findlay community, we still have this issue where there are kids that don't have enough to eat in a week. And I think it's a hard balance to be able to accommodate a solution, but it's nice to be able to have those conversations. And when you see what other communities are doing and what's working for them, it's great, because they're the guinea pigs for some of the most innovative things that are out there. And there is a lot going on in America's cities, and there's a lot going on in Findlay, Ohio, and it's nice to just kind of be able to blend the two.
You also recently were in Austin, Texas for the South by Southwest. Apparently they just have a conference for everything at South by Southwest. There's a mayoral conference as well there. This is your first year going.
My first year going. It's the 3rd year. They have a Civic IO event where they bring about a dozen or so mayors from across the country. They bring us together. We get to present at the South by Southwest conference on different things. I actually presented with LeVar Stoney, the mayor of Richmond, Virginia, and we talked again about this young, new generation of mayors who are doing things. But we also were there to present on cybersecurity. There was a lot of conversations about what cities are doing relative to cybersecurity. I think about our friends down in Atlanta last year, or last week, that just dealt with a major breach in their network. And I think now I was just there visiting with my sister, and she said, it's all a mess, and now we have to pay our water bills through the mail as opposed to just doing things online. So Hopefully they get that fixed soon. But there's a lot going on, and it's a great opportunity for mayors to go learn about technology, innovative ideas. I learned how to think like a futurist, which is one of the most uncomfortable things in the world. I think, we as mayors deal with kind of real-time scenarios. We have a design that we try and follow, which is great. But I don't know that it's natural for mayors to think like 12, 15 years down the road,
right.
Because who knows that if we're gonna be guaranteed that long. And that was a real challenge for me.
Well, let's talk about that in sort of the context of Findlay. And a lot of times, especially with Findlay doing pretty well in most aspects, it's hard for someone to look, this is working, why do we need to change this? I'm imagining that if you're talking like a futurist, there's probably some discussion about, look, we know it's working, but here's what might be coming down the road. What are some of the things they talk about coming down the road that could completely upset the apple cart or, just turn things upside down that you have to be ready for?
I think one of the things that we have yet to really have a conversation about in the Findlay community has everything to do with autonomous vehicles. There's a lot of conversation around, well, we need more parking garages in downtown Findlay. We need more parking spaces. But to be honest, in 5 to 10 years from now, will there really need to be a place to actually park a car? Or will someone just come by your house and pick you up and drop you off, or someone or some car?
Right.
What does that look like? And what type of infrastructure needs are going to be required for autonomous vehicles, if any? What does that network look like? What's our fiber loop have to be in order to accommodate those types of things? We, unfortunately, we don't live in a bubble here in Findlay, and there's going to be a lot going on, I think, just in technology that I don't know that necessarily we've really had that conversation yet, but there seems to be a lot to discuss around autonomous vehicles and what that impact will have on our economy.
Couple more questions, and we'll let you go. I know you've got a meeting coming up here. But as far as having that conversation, how do we begin to have that conversation? Because that, I think a lot of people say, well, we didn't know this was going to happen, or and whether or not that's they had opportunity or not, we can debate that back and forth. But how do you start to have conversations about these things that are so far out that it's hard to even really grasp that concept right now?
I think it's a matter of bringing subject matter experts into town, having the old style town hall meetings, utilizing technology, like social media, to have those conversations and, just start a dialogue. 5 years is a really long time, and a lot can change in that period. And, I just think about, when we were opening up the Millstream Career Center when it was brand new back in 2012, and look at all that's changed just relative to career education. We're not talking about vocational schools anymore. We're talking about career prep, and we need more students in those educational institutions so that we can have people for the jobs of today and tomorrow. So a lot changes in a very small amount of time, and I think we just need to be willing to have the conversation.
We got one comment. Turn up the volume. I don't know if this is actually going to do it or not. It could be just an issue with the microphones. And
sorry,
apologies,
John.
Apologies for any technical issues. Hopefully we can boost the audio. But one last question. Usually this comes up whenever there's travel involved. People ask, who's paying the expenses on that. So.
Yeah, well, we have travel accommodated in my budget. Some of the travel that I have throughout the year is paid for outside of the city budget. Some of it I pay for it on my own. It's just a matter of taking care of the business that we need to take care of. I think it's great that Findlay is a part of both a statewide and a national conversation about really important topics. One in particular is relative to the Army Corps of Engineers. We're going to be a part of the reform process of the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm looking forward to that. That opportunity is being afforded to me because of the relationships that I've established through the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We're talking about the opioid crisis and what its impact has not only in Findlay but also in the state of Ohio. We've been able to make some changes at the state level around that. Because of the relationships that I have with not only the Ohio Mayors Alliance but the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I'm just thankful to be a part of such a good organization, and I'm thankful to add Findlay's voice and also to represent Findlay in the national infrastructure conversation as well. So it's all worthwhile. I think there's one heck of a return on our investment, and I'll look forward to continuing to do it.
All right, Findlay Mayor Lydia Mihalik, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, Doug.
We'll try to do more of these. The goal is eventually to hit one of these once a week. about a variety of different subjects, not just city business, not just county business, but things like cryptocurrency and things like that we don't hey, we've heard about it in the news. Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't have any Bitcoin,
I
do you?
don't know what that is.
Really?
No, I don't.
It was worth a lot in December. It's not worth quite as much now.
Yeah, okay.
Eventually, we're going to find out why. But anyway, if you have ideas on maybe subjects that you want to learn more about, and we can go out and do interviews on those, put them in the comments section here, and we'll try and get to those. Do appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to share this on Facebook or with your friends in Findlay and beyond so they can see what else is going on. Again, Mayor, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Doug.
All
Anytime.
Right, now the awkward transition to hitting the button.
Okay.
I mean, it says finish right there, but it doesn't want to finish. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to shut off the app.